Yes, so we have now reached the lightning talk portion of our conference, which is personally one of my favorite kind of events, because it lets all of you come up here, which is cool, right? We have all these really smart people in the room. Some people submitted talks, some are just here, and we really get to hear, from the whole community this way. So they're 5 minutes or less talks that are just kind of randomly pulled from the crowd, and people sign up. So yeah, you're just going to hear about a bunch of cool stuff that people are doing. And I think we might have a few more spots for tomorrow. So if you're inspired by this activity, feel free to kind of sign up for those slots as well. Yeah, so that's basically what this is. So without further rambling on my side, up next is Robin talking about Alchemy CMS.
Thanks. Yeah, as you said, my name is Robin. I come from Germany. And before I moved to Berlin, I lived in Hamburg my whole life. And I run a consultancy which is called Magic Labs. I'm Robin Böning on Twitter and on GitHub also. So this is for me. I want to give a short introduction to Alchemy CMS. This is a content management system written in Ruby. On top of the framework Ruby on Rails, and Alchemy CMS was released in 2007 at first, and completely open sourced in 2010. And we use it a lot in our company, and we also maintain it on GitHub. What is Alchemy CMS, and what does it provide, and what is it focusing on? Basically, or the very fundamental aspect of Alchemy is the separation of content and markup. This is my first point. This is almost the most important aspect of all. Separation means flexibility and freedom. Flexibility because you're not bound to any rendering endpoint. The output can be HTML or XML or JSON, or maybe PDF. So this is quite open for the developer, or for just what the requirement is. The second point is the usage, which is easy for the editor. This is one point Alchemy focus on. The principle here is to reduce complexity whenever possible. And another thing is the flexibility for developers. So due to different things, Alchemy is extremely flexible on its technical side. One reason is, of course, it's built on top of Rails, which provides a lot of patterns and libraries which can be used by the software. And there's another thing, the architecture of Alchemy itself. Imagine a headline on a website of a few characters, or values of select fields, for example. These are the smallest parts in the Alchemy CMS, which is mapped to database fields. And you as a developer or as a designer, you decide on how to bind those or form those contents together as an element. And elements can contain other elements, and you can render those elements on pages. And so this is the combinations of rendering possibilities is endless. And another thing is easy third-party integration for third-party software, or development of individual logic like modules around the CMS, which is also a benefit, of course, from Ruby on Rails. So it's very easy. And my next point is freedom for the designer. This is related to the first point, because the separation of content and markup means the designer is completely free and totally independent of designing the markup and writing the markup at all. So there's complete control for the designer of writing those things and styling. I think my time is up in a few seconds. So this is the domain. If you want to check it out, it's alchemycms.com. This is something I have no good transition to, but I found this on our Slack channel yesterday, and there was one guy asking how to contribute to the documentation. And so the answer was everyone is in charge, so just go there, contribute and write something, what you notice. If there's a typo, just fix it and make a pull request on GitHub. And I found this interesting because it was just yesterday. This is Write the Docs, and so there's a relation. And I want to highlight this because I found this is a nice example of how open source works. And maybe some of you have proprietary software, and maybe you could think about open source your documentation, because your community might help you fixing your typos or just some other stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. There is a walkway over here if you don't want to jump and possibly kill yourself. Not good. All right, so next up is David with Shifting Personas.
Can everyone hear me? My name's David Oliver. I work for Cluster HQ. I've been there for about 4 months. But prior to joining Cluster, I worked for IBM for 15 years. Is there anyone in the room that's ever worked or does work for IBM? Good, I can pretty much say what I want. So I worked on the messaging portfolio, mostly MQ, and I'm basically just going to tell a story about how I was working on projects that was part of the design thinking portfolio, and we had personas for each part of the software, and we reached a point where our documentation was going up for final review. It was about 6 weeks away from release, and there's someone that's been in IBM a lot longer than I had called Adam the Administrator, and through all the history of MQ, which is about 25 years old, Adam the Administrator was the principal user of the software, and because of this there was lots of kind of guidance about what this person could do and what they had expectations of using the product. And the product I was working on, which was MQ Lite, which was a new product, was aimed at Adam the Administrator. So we're in this final review, and myself and the design chap were sat there, and we were getting absolutely torn to shreds by the service lead. And the main point was the documentation is not good enough, and we're going to lose a fortune in service calls. We didn't have enough information on trace, on error handling, and lots of stuff like this, and it was going to be bad news for IBM. And we sat there and thought, well, the product is free, and it's a proprietary software product, but we give it away for free. It's a segue into users using Bluemix, which is chargeable. And our retort was not, okay, we'll go away and we'll go and add all this stuff. It was, we don't need it. If we get to the point where our users are having to phone up IBM and say this piece of software doesn't work, we've already lost them. They've already gone. They've moved on to another product which is free, which they can install quicker or doesn't have the same bugs. And it eventually led to the death of Adam the Administrator and the rise of Andy the developer. And we totally shifted the way that we were presenting our material. It meant that our installation instructions were no longer a piece of work that an administrator would use after a customer had bought our product. It was almost part of the marketing material. If our installation instructions suggest our product is really difficult to install, they're not going to install it. That single realization led to us shifting the way we presented our information, particularly around installation, and we fought really hard not to have problem determination on version 1 of the product, because we said if we say that this has got lots of problems, they're going to think it's a really hard piece of software to use. And the rise of Andy the developer as a persona meant that we could tailor our documentation much more aligned to who would actually use our product. The end of my story is, what we took away from that was the design guys and myself, we worked together to, well, how can we fight this off? And shifting personas was something that we came up with, where on a monthly basis, on new products, we just looked at it, is the persona that this product has been built for the same as it was when we designed it in the first place? And it was just over coffee, it was just a review of, you know, all the decisions and all the kind of the change stuff that goes into any product when you're building it. Does that have an impact on who's going to be the end user? And it worked quite well. And I've brought it into the new company I was working for. Thank you.
Give a plug.
Frustration.
All right, we have slides. Success. All right, next up is Eugene talking about how to create assembly instructions.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to share some thoughts about how to create assembly instructions. I was quite an ordinary technical writer. I explain software stuff, and it was challenging for me to start explaining hardware stuff. So, if you do find yourself in a situation when you need to create assembly instructions, I would like to highlight some thoughts. When our company decided to develop a new product, it is needed to get assembly instruction on the day of the product launch. So we can't use photos like this. We just need to use special tools. These tools, as you may see, use the vector graphics. It looks neat and more professional, but it's just my opinion. These tools are called 3D authoring tools. You may have noticed that the hell of all technical illustrations is ability to hide components. These tools allow to hide components details in a smart way, so you don't delete, you don't exclude these details. You just hide them and save an entire scene like this in a particular snapshot. So whenever you need to get back to one particular step, assembly step, you just need to open a saved snapshot and you can proceed with editing. Another benefit of these tools is easy update. So when original design is changed, it is very easy to get your illustrations up to date. So you click one button and the illustrations are up to date. So when you are finished with your technical illustrations, you just need to refine them. Add some arrows, explanatory labels, and import in your template. In my case, it was a LaTeX template, and then you provide brief description. Sorry, there is hard to read, but there is brief description for particular illustrations, and you're all set. And if you do find yourself in a situation when you need to create assembly instruction manual, I highly recommend using this 3D authoring tool. It's going to pay off. Thank you.
All right, and next up, we have a whole troupe. No, it's just two. So this is David Ryan talking about 10 more lessons for launching an open source TechCom startup.
Very much. Do you guys want to do an experiment? Come on, technical communicators, communicate with me. Do you want to try an experiment?
Yeah!
Whoa, that was Cheers, amazing. I'm going to ask for one completely real volunteer that I haven't asked during lunch to be the volunteer. Anybody? Oh, here we go, right over here. Sorry. First, can you please give a small round of applause for my designer for his beautiful slide deck? So we're going to do 10 slides, 20, 25 seconds? 25 seconds, good. So you'll time, so when it gets to 25 seconds, when we say go, shout out, Ben will rip it off and I'll move on to the next one. Does anyone here actually know who I am? A couple of people? Come on, Red Hatters. So I used to work for a company called Red Hat. I was a technical writer there. And I was a part of a project that built one version of an internal workflow, basically how we published. It was a prototype that got moved into production, and that production tool took over 2/3 of the company's global software documentation. I say this during pitches, and investors and kind of startup people seem really impressed. We'll get to the reality of that through this little talk. So this is 10 more surprising lessons I learned while launching an open source tech comms startup. It's a run-on sentence, it's meant to be. I know there's people already putting commas and brackets and sketching. If you see my Twitter account, we'll connect up. You'll see I pinned a talk from earlier in the year at LinuxConf. That's the... Okay, let's go. All right, so first lesson we learned is that the first version of your software will suck. Despite it being in production and used by nearly every employee at Red Hat, most of them relatively unhappy. I'm sorry, it was a prototype. Let's go. Share the suck. Okay, so when I left Red Hat, we took it out with this and we tried to fork it at first, but we realized it sucks. So what we had to do was actually open source it entirely, create Amazon images and give it to everyone so the world could say, you suck, which is a very terrifying thing. Let's go. Start from other users. So when we built this thing, we were a bunch of people working on JBoss middleware products. So we built it in, can anyone guess? JBoss middleware products. Turns out that's not the best way to build an internal documentation toolchain. It turns out the best way is to ask users what they want, which is what we've done from now. Let's go. Now this is cool, I'm way ahead of the club. If anyone knows me and has heard me speak at events, you'll know I've gotten in trouble recently from swearing a little too much. So design think that... So we've taken an approach as a UX and design-led company now to not just be nerds building tools to scratch our own itch, but to use the concepts of UX and design thinking to start from the users and work backwards. So if we had real slides, we'd show you the UI and the front end that we've built using Angular and a lot of JavaScript. And it turns out this is really cool because you can just patch in things like Firebase to act as like a backend as a service, or Parse if you're into that. Still there? Cool. This is awesome. Open source startup life is brutal. I guarantee you probably haven't heard open source startup very often together. There's a reason. It's called poverty. That's a we live in Paris, and so people mostly go, an Australian startup living in Paris, it's amazing. In fact, we're the first international startup accepted at the NUMA Sprint Accelerator in Paris. But we sleep basically in a shoebox together, all curled up, starving every day. But, open source startup life is awesome. So I guarantee anyone that's been in their tech comms company for too long, get the beep out of there, take your projects with you, iterate as quickly as you can. Because it turns out if you want to work with machine learning, if you want to do stuff on mobile, if you want to learn UX, the best way is to just get out there and do it as a startup and open source it back to the people from your company. So Mikey and all the Red Hat people have been really supportive of us. People will find it. So when I left, it was just me. Everyone on the original project has left the company. Some went to Facebook, some went to Google, some went to all the big brands that give you a lot more money than other companies might. But wait. But what I've been surprised about is not only have all my former Red Hat colleagues been very supportive of what we're trying to do, but they've joined the community and a lot of other people, hopefully including some of yourselves if you wish. And the bit I really love is that people will fund it. This is the scary thing as an open source startup. What I was very proud of is that if you see the video of me talking at LinuxConf, half an hour after that video I met a guy called Bob Young. He co-founded a company called Red Hat. He was the first CEO to take an open source company to IPO, let alone the first one to take venture capital money. And he was also the first one to become our angel investor. Since then we've had Numa in Paris and Google come on board as investors as well. So there is some money. The poverty thing was kind of a joke. But rest assured, if you do want to take tech comms products and do it yourself as open source, you can. Phew. Good tools equals collab. Okay, cool, I agree with that. So good tools equals collab. So what we mean about this is we are basically, Ben's a designer and engineer. I'm an engineer and tech comms guy that worked as a business analyst and a technology journalist and a bunch of other stuff. So clearly I wasn't very good at a lot of them. 3, 2, 1, and we're under construction. That's slide 10, so please join us and help us build this thing. Thank you very much.
I am also doing an open source tech comm startup, and it is very much like poverty. Luckily, I like camping, so it's fine. So next up, all right. So one housekeeping. Sarah, I believe Sarah Chambers. You're also gonna. Well, we're gonna have time for you, and that's gonna be the last one. So come on up after this. Next up is Kenzie with review. What?
Hi, my name is Kenzie. My Twitter handle is RainbowKens, which I didn't realize I would still be having all these years later. Anyway, I wanted to spend slightly less than 5 minutes talking about regularly reviewing your knowledge repositories. And I actually almost feel a bit silly, especially following so closely on Adam's great talk about how maybe you shouldn't be doing all the things I'm about to advocate doing. But anyway, what I'm gonna soldier on anyway. So, I've been having a lot of conversations at Write the Docs for the last couple years in Portland, and even so far this weekend, where I say to people, so I gotta know, how do you make sure that the information you have in your repositories gets looked at regularly? How do you make sure that it's still accurate? And people seemingly inevitably start telling me about how they get the content reviewed before it gets published for the first time. And I say, okay, that's cool, so it's up there, so now what? Like, now what happens? And they're like, what are you talking about? I don't understand your question. I say, okay, so it's been published, it's live, how does it ever get looked at again? And they go, oh wow, yeah, and then they trail off. So the thing is, like, a lot of Adam's great points are not ever going to work for some of the documentation that I do, which is I document software that is made by other people who live in far distant countries that have nothing to do with me. We have no relationship. I'm making how-tos for people to use software in a very specific way at my specific place of work. And those documents do need to be looked at, but we're an educational institute, which means nothing ever changes. So things can stay live for a long time without a lot of changes happening. But they still need to be looked at occasionally. And there's lots of ways that we've made that happen. So we do the periodic review thing. We don't do a content audit. We do have feedback forms up on the site. But the most regular way that review happens is just by getting the original content owner or the person who's taken it over to have a quick look at it every 6 months, 9 months, a year, and say, yeah, it's still good to go, or no, it needs these changes. And this has actually been a huge bugaboo over the years. Like, we have a thing, and what it used to do to get people to review their content is we'd send them an email. Gosh, that didn't work, because number one, email is the ultimate back channel, right? So there's no accountability. They can say, I didn't even see your email, or, oh yeah, I saw your email, but I was going to get to it. But there's nothing that ever follows up on that. We have a ticketing system, and that ticketing system can assign people tasks. When someone calls in and says, hey, my computer's not working, or I can't connect to Wi-Fi, that's an incident, and it gets assigned as a task to people. So we've actually sort of taken that task assignment process, and we've used it for our review of the knowledge articles. So people get assigned a task, and if they don't review it and close that task, then it sits there in the queue, and it makes them look terrible in the ticketing system. So that's one way. Another way is I gave a lightning talk at the Portland Write the Docs, and I talked about how we made our resource with a lick of paint look a lot better, and that improved people's attitude to that repository, and it made it worthwhile for them to change it. But basically those two things together mean we went from being about 20% reviewed, and those 20% were my articles, to over 80% reviewed in less than 9 months. And now we've maintained that for a year. So it continues to be about 80% reviewed, which is a lot better than 20%. It's not as good as 100, but no one's ever getting to 100. So I would actually really love it if all of you who have responsibility for maintaining repositories, please come and talk to me. And I really want to get all of your ideas for all the different ways that we can help to make that review process better. I would really love to make our process better, and so I encourage you to please come talk to me. Thank you very much.
Do you have slides? All right. You're just like menacingly carrying a computer up to
Just hold it.
And I think that's the beautiful thing about Write the Docs, right? Like, we can have two different views on the world, and they can both be correct based on where we work or our organizations and all this kind of stuff, right? So there's definitely some critical thinking that needs to come in. Don't just, you know, oh, it was on stage, yes, that, do that. You know, like, we're all here to kind of share what works for us, and that's the beauty of it, right? All right, and then the last talk, still menacingly holding on, is Sarah Chambers talking about can't manage what you don't measure.
Cool, yeah, I guess you need this. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Chambers, and yes, this is the second Canadian in a row on the stage. How impressive. I'm just going to open up my notes here, because, you know. This is why you don't have a long password. Nobody's breaking into my laptop today. Okay. So yes, I want to talk about what gets managed, what gets measured gets managed. Because I love data and I love measurements, and I think it's really important for everyone to have measurements in their work. I was actually talking with Eric yesterday about how we get technical writers and support to have a seat at the table, to have a voice with their company, and to get their feedback taken really seriously. And I think metrics might actually be the answer to that. So metrics help us show our value, they facilitate relationships, and they help us improve over time. So if you look, metrics help us show our value. So at the end of the day, how many of us are here to make money? How many people like money? Great, okay, so all of us contribute to a business that needs to make money somehow. We need to get our salaries paid. As sad as that is, that's kind of the case. So we need to attract a customer, we need to sell to that customer, and then we need to retain that customer. If what we're doing can't connect to that bottom line and show that we are attracting and retaining customers and getting more referrals, why are they even going to pay us in the first point? So they need to see that return on investment, and the only way to show that is with metrics. Second point, metrics help us facilitate relationships. So Rion had a really good point about having aligned values helps us focus our actions. And so metrics, you can use them to focus departments together. So for example, if you have support, which is my background, and tech writing together, you can say, let's have a combined metric that we're going to reduce the number of tickets and increase the number of knowledge base views. That seems like a metric that everyone can get on board with and we can work together on. For engineering and tech writing, you might have something like reducing release times. If you've got better documentation, you can code faster, you can release faster, you'll know what bugs are out there. And finally, metrics help us improve. So if we don't know how well our last documentation did, if we didn't have success metrics, if we didn't know, did we do a really good job at the end, there's no way to stop us from making those same mistakes again. So by keeping really detailed metrics, you can actually improve over time, and that just makes all of us feel like better people at the end of the day. So how do we set these creative metrics? We want to have another good point. How do you say it's 38% more friendly? Well, that's emojis. Yeah, so maybe that's it. Maybe you have somebody comment on Twitter about your documentation and say, I love your documentation. That's a metric you can manage. Maybe you have like the little thumbs up at the bottom of your articles and say, yeah, I got more thumbs up today than I did yesterday. That's a metric that you can manage and something that you can work towards. So to start, you have to set the why. Why are we spending the time writing it? Is it to help users help themselves? And then what does that look like? Okay, well, users are searching, they can find the documents, and then they do that action. Okay, well, how do we track that? Well, we're going to look at Google Analytics and track their path through the knowledge base. So you can start setting all these metrics up, and that helps you improve, it helps you generate relationships, and it helps you show your impact to the bottom line. which will help you get a seat at the table because they can see every piece of value that you're bringing. And just to wrap that up, so my name's Sarah and I work as the head of support at Kayako. If I haven't told you the story of how we got the name, it's really interesting, come find me. But we're actually a customer support platform that builds products so that you can better help your customers, and that includes a help center. So we're building products that help create these new creative metrics. So if you have something that you want to be able to measure and your tools don't currently do it, I'd love to talk to you. So come hang out with me, let's talk about really interesting technical metrics. And finally, just track your metrics fanatically because they will help you improve over time.
Thank you once again to all of our brave Lightning Talk speakers. A lot of people, the first time they ever get on a stage in front of a scary amount of people is in this very situation. So it's an amazing thing to get people up on the stage for the first time, and it's one of the reasons we do it, because a lot of our speakers here started out with Lightning Talks, and now they're going to be full talks this year, and it's pretty magical. So, I think we have about a 7-minute break because we went a little bit long, so run, don't walk to the bathroom, and we'll be back here in about 5 or 6 minutes with another talk. So, cheers.